Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first ever episode of Navigating NewSpace. My name is Shayna Hume. In 2017, I was one of the first people to apply to the Matthew Isakowitz Fellowship Program and became part of its inaugural cohort. The Matthew Isakowitz Program is a highly selective internship and mentorship program which provides extraordinary summer opportunities to upper-level students interested and passionate about commercial space. MIFP was created in memory of Matthew Isakowitz, an engineer, astropreneur, and incredible human being whose passion for commercial space exploration led to great strides in the industry and inspired all who knew him. Our program seeks to instill that same enthusiasm, community, and caring into the next generation of spaceflight leaders by providing impactful career training to those who embody Matthew's drive for exploring the universe to better humankind. Today, I am so thrilled to kick one of our very first alumni-run programs off of the ground, Navigating NewSpace. In this live segment, we want to give you insight into the rapidly evolving world of commercial space through candid conversations with our fellows, executive mentors, and program affiliates. For our first ever episode, I am so pleased to introduce you to our guest, one of the first mentors to join our program, Suzi McBride. Suzi's career was born at Motorola, working on the original Iridium network. She has since been in charge of many large satellite programs and recently was the COO at OneWeb from 2016 to 2019. Today, she's back at Iridium as the COO, responsible for all network operations and innovations on new networks. Suzi, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be one of the first interviewees.
Absolutely, and I'm so excited to have you. And I know I already gave, yeah?
I have to say, I love your background and all of your articles. That's awesome.
Thank you so much. I collect a lot of space cross-journalism things, and I'm so excited to get to show it off today. I know I already gave a few tidbits about you, but do you think you could kick us off by telling me a bit more about your background and some of the pivotal moments that really led you to where you are today?
Yeah, so, I started actually industrial engineer coming out of college, and I started my first journey and career in New York City doing some management consulting. And after a couple of years, realized, that's not quite the career path I wanted for myself and interest. So one of the pivotal points was making a decision to go back for a master's degree and get back into more engineering. And that's where I landed with Motorola being my sponsor and working on the first Iridium program. And back then I had no idea that people didn't build satellites once a week. So for me, it was, why not? Let's do this. And so that was probably the first kind of pivotal moment in my career and getting me into the space industry, which I always loved, even since I was a young girl watching the shuttle programs go, in the 80s. I had a keen interest in that whole space environment. And, as I went through, there's been a couple of different pivotal moments for me where I took some risk. They were very calculated risks, but after Motorola finished the Iridium program and kind of got out of space, I jumped at an opportunity to do cellular for about 4 years. And I lived in China, I lived in Australia. And, a lot of people didn't want to take that move at that point in time in their lives. But taking that chance not only exposed me to international business and living in different parts of the world, but also gave me the background and better understanding of telecommunications, RF environments, which kind of culminated in, going into Iridium, the second round, and then into OneWeb, and really understanding more about how networks work, the ground systems, the subscriber units. So all of those kind of choice decisions I made kind of led me on this path. So I think those were, the big ones. And then going into Iridium, the second round, and doing Iridium Next. When I left the company I was with, which was General Dynamics, to come and do Iridium Next, people thought we were crazy. They said, what are you doing going to a company like small Iridium that's going to have to raise $3 billion of capital? They can't do it. But I'm a believer in the impossible can be done if you think about it. And I love those hard challenges and problems. So that was another kind of pivotal decision to take a risk and come to Iridium and figure out how we're going to build this next constellation.
That's super interesting. So on this whole journey, when did you figure out that it was going to be space versus some other application of technologies that you would be qualified to work on? When did you fall in love with it?
Well, I fell in love with it early on, right? Early in my younger life as a young grade schooler. But after doing Iridium at Motorola the first time, that was such an amazing experience. And we always say here at Iridium, like, it gets in your blood, and it really does. Everyone kind of loves the program we built and the system we have. But when I left and did cellular for 4 years, although it was a great experience, that was when it really became very apparent to myself that I didn't love that industry as much as I love space. And so, I knew space was more of what interests me personally, motivated me, and challenged me. So I think that was kind of the turning point that I knew that's where I really wanted to focus my career, rather than going on the telecommunication path, getting something that combined telecommunications and space together.
Makes total sense. What was it like moving to a smaller organization after having been part of some massive ones?
I've been at a lot of different types of companies, right? I've been a very large Motorola, General Dynamics. And that was a great place, I always say, to grow up, because they do come with a lot of processes and procedures, and you learn from those big experiences. But coming to the smaller, Iridium, and then to OneWeb as a startup, which is a completely different environment than a public, smaller company. I like personally the smaller companies where you can have more of an impact on, the day-to-day and understanding the direction and strategy of the company. So I've always kind of loved this smaller, medium-sized companies rather than the very, very large corporations. And I also love that, like, Iridium is public, so being part of a public company brings a different experience than being part of a startup world. So I kind of like all of them, and I think at different points in my career, they've served their purpose for teaching me and me becoming a part of building and growing those companies as they are today.
That makes total sense. Commercial space is a much broader umbrella that usually encapsulates new space within it. And it seems like pretty much your whole career has been on different companies within commercial space. Do you remember the first time that you heard about commercial space and what you used to think about it before you were a part of it?
I don't remember like the first time. When I grew up, it was mostly, there was still commercial. There's Boeings and Lockheeds and those around, but they were all still kind of in part of the government circles and worlds. So probably in the late 90s is when commercial space for me really started taking off. There's a lot of new companies with a lot of the, the big constellations coming back in the late 90s. A lot of commercial launch companies came in place. There was a lot of other commercial satellite providers. So I think that's the first time, NewSpace kind of came into play. And I was part of that and seeing it kind of grow and then fizzle and now grow again. So I've kind of seen it over the years, move through the cycles that come with, the growth and evolution of the different types of technologies. But I've really, in the recent years, when we were looking at launch companies back in the mid 2000s, and that's when SpaceX was a very new player. We were looking to launch the next constellation, and working with SpaceX was an amazing adventure. I mean, when we started talking to them, they had only done some Falcon 1s, which didn't succeed. They had this thing called the Falcon 9 coming, and really working with the small team at the time and watching them evolve. And we knew they sort of had the capability and the right technical teams in place and the right gumption to get it going, that we signed the large commercial contract with them. So that's kind of the first time it really took off for us, going into this kind of commercial market. And I love watching the commercial plays that are happening right now and all over, both in the space world, satellites, the launch vehicles. There's a lot of it now, and I think it's really exciting for the industry.
Definitely. What do you think is the most different between, that commercial market of the 90s that you remember originally and the commercial market of today?
I think there's a lot of similarities, but there's a huge difference in that everyone's getting much, much further. So there's smarter ways to think that people are attacking the business cases, the funding sources, getting something up there quickly, getting it tested versus, getting it all perfected before they even, just on paper, before you start building things. So I just see a renewed interest in innovation. And I also see there's a difference in some of the funding sources. A lot of people now understand the remarkable nature of different kinds of space solutions. So I think there's also the underlying business current that helps support and build those new kind of systems and solutions in the new space world.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Speaking of innovation, I'd love to turn around for a moment and talk about the fellowship. When did you first hear about it?
I heard about it when Steve was in his team was starting to create it. So Steve and I have known each other for many years, and he reached out about starting this new fellowship program. And, of course, I said, absolutely, would love to become involved and become a mentor and help grow the fellowship. And I was so impressed with, your first class of the caliber of the students that came into it and the caliber of the program. So I've stayed involved the last, this is my third year.
That's amazing. Has mentorship made a big difference in your life in the past?
Yes, it has. I mean, having a good mentor, I think, enables you to bounce ideas off of and get some guidance and maybe make you think about something a little bit different than you would have on your own. So absolutely, I'm a big fan of mentors.
For those out there, I know a lot of people who are watching may be prospective applicants to the program for next year or the year after. For those who are still looking for that mentorship to help elevate their career forward, what advice would you give?
In terms of what to look for, or?
Yeah, in terms of, what makes for a good mentor. It's easy to connect with someone and call them a mentor. It's a lot harder to use that connection in a way that really benefits what you want to do.
Yes. I think, having a mentor, the first thing is you have to have that connection. It's very important to sort of have it a little bit organic. Sometimes the force mentors aren't as easy. So you have to have that kind of relationship that you can build, that you can trust. Trust is really important as well. But, I always look for mentors that will give you the truth, the hard truth when you need it. Who won't just give you what the plain advice is, but telling you when you should vector or change course, or something might not be in your best interest, or if you're going after it for the wrong reasons. So I think that's a key, is where you can have that trust relationship with a mentor who's going to give you sound advice, even when it might not be what you want to hear.
Okay. That makes sense. Right now, I know that myself and lots of other fellows of the program, we're in a position where we're very passionate about commercial space, and we have lots of ideas for what we want to happen, whether in the near future or someday. But I know that many of us have had the frustration that it's difficult to make an impact, especially at this younger end of our career. What role do you think young people are going to have going forward in commercial and in new space?
First of all, I love your passions. I mean, I think that's very unique to the generations today. You guys have a big I can do things and set out to do that. I think the biggest play is to bring those new ideas and that new energy, and also because you haven't been there and done it, you can challenge a lot of us that have been burnt by doing certain things in the past, to challenge us to okay, that might have happened to you 10, 20 years ago, but why can't we try it today? So I think you can always keep challenging us to think differently and not get stuck in our ways just because we've had experiences. Now you have to also value those experiences, because there's a lot of lessons to be learned in our experiences. And so finding that right balance between challenging the norm, but also understanding the history and why things might have occurred the way they did. And in some cases, they need to be adhered to going forward, because sometimes physics is physics and other things you can't change. But I think definitely the ideas, the energy, and that can-do spirit to get us all moving in the right path. And I think you guys also grew up in a different world than we did in terms of the technology that's been available, and thinking about how can the new technologies be applied, and how can we use space to solve challenges of today.
Yeah, totally. Are there any new technologies or ideas coming up the pipeline that you're excited about?
There's a lot.
Mm.
I love to see where the launch vehicles are going. I mean, that's just incredible. The technologies that are coming out, the costs that are coming down, because once we can reduce costs for space access, whether that's satellite platforms or launch vehicles, it enables more business cases to open up. So I think that's a big driver. I don't always have the next ideas on technology of what systems or solutions are out there, but the biggest barrier has been access to space, right? Getting launches up of satellites, just the enormous costs that it entailed to do that. So I think watching both the launch and the satellite platform cost come down, the mass manufacturing come up, it should hopefully enable more and more ideas and technologies and services to come out of the new space realm.
Yeah. How has the business case finally justifying these cheap rocket launches and reusable rocket launches, how has that influenced the constellations that you're now trying to work on at places like OneWeb and Iridium?
Yeah, I mean, well, so for Iridium, we've successfully launched ours, and I think having SpaceX as a partner enabled us to be able to do the $3 billion constellation at a reasonable, still a huge cost, but reasonable cost and get high quality up there. So that definitely was a big enabler for us getting our constellation built and launched. On the new big LEOs that are coming out, these business cases are still hard and challenging, and the time will tell how they solve and prove out in the end. But in order to build constellations of hundreds and thousands of satellites, the cost has to get down, right? You can't be spending 10, 30, $50 million a satellite and build 1,000 of them. So I think that has enabled, as the costs come down, it enables businesses to look at how can I provide this solution at a much more, I say reasonable, it's still billions of dollars, but at a more reasonable cost than what it was traditionally in the past.
Where do you hope to see the future of all these constellations going? Saying that it all works out perfectly and that there's, no mistakes made along the way. Where would you hope that it goes and takes us?
Well, I hope they can keep going. The one, I think, challenge that we have to watch out for is the space debris. I think that's something your generation especially is going to have to watch out for, because we have to be all very good stewards of space and ensuring that we're watching that as we launch and launch and launch, because that's, we need to protect the space and we need to make sure that we are bringing it down. At Iridium, we're very big stewards of space and ensuring that we're thought leaders in how to do that and make sure that we can bring anything down that we put up. That's really important, because if we can't preserve space, then we're going to be limited in the years to come on all those new ideas and innovations and costs. So I think that's a big challenge going forward that we have to all be part of together, to work together on. But in general, I think there's a lot of solutions out there, and I'm just hoping that the platforms we're all building enable that innovation to continue, so that that's something that is in our DNA, is to make sure that it can evolve into things we can't foresee. When the first Iridium system was built in the in the 90s, it was built as a cellular phone system. In general, that was what Motorola did, and that's what it was built on. Obviously, the business case, there's tons of stories and written about it, but because it was designed as a very flexible platform, the Iridium today, who took over in the 2000s, was able to evolve it into an IoT, Internet of Things solutions. It still does a lot of phone communications and safety services. We do aero and maritime. So I think the important part is in all of the new space is that it's built in a way that's innovative, that you can continue to create and change and evolve as the businesses change on the ground and the needs on the ground change.
Definitely. Something that you said in that answer totally piqued my interest.
Yeah.
Space debris. One of my favorite topics is the environment around Earth. Do companies like OneWeb and Iridium have teams that look ahead to space debris issues and try to predict and maybe protect that arena?
Oh, absolutely. I can talk to both. I mean, Iridium, we have a team, not like that's not their entire job, right? But there's a team that focuses on that. And our satellite operations team does an amazing job of watching and ensuring that we always have the capability to bring down something, to make sure that it's safe. We have safely deorbited all of the active satellites we had on our Block 1 system. So it's very important at Iridium. At OneWeb, it also was important to us, and we had a team. In fact, it was developed that because of being so much higher in orbit as well, that the deorbit systems had a higher reliability than just like the regular platform systems, because it was really critical for OneWeb as a company as well to ensure that they were protecting space and had the capability that, if the payload was lost or any issues, they could still deorbit safely and get that out of space to preserve for others in future systems.
Definitely. I'm really glad to hear those things. I don't come from the satellite side personally, but lunar and LEO waste management is incredibly important. And while my generation might be the one who continues to address it, it's amazing to see companies looking ahead with the kind of foresight to that future.
Well, and you'd be amazed just like, let's say, lunar exploration, when you have a lot of satellites, that can also impact the ability to get something launched. So, timing of that launch, and in scientific missions, especially, there's a lot of the time of the launch has to be precise, right? Because if you miss it, you've got to wait months or sometimes months until you can launch again. And so having more and more satellites up there could impede the ability to get through in a certain time and path. So I think that's also, it's not just the debris aspect, but also the access and, ensuring that there's always paths to get beyond our LEO and MEO and world and into, the greater outer space for exploration that we want to do.
Absolutely. That's the goal of so many of us.
Mm-hmm.
As we start to wrap up, this conversation, I had a few questions about how space relates to society and to the world today. And these are the kinds of questions that I find particularly fascinating to ask, because I want to know not only how do young people think about this, but how do people who are already in impactful positions make use of those positions. So firstly, the one that I really wanted to ask you in particular was, with the growing importance of diversity in the space field and all the efforts that people are putting in to that end, what obstacles do you feel like you had to overcome to become a successful female executive? And do you have any advice for the women out there who might be looking forward to those same obstacles?
Yeah, did I have obstacles? Yeah, probably. I was often the only female in a room. Often I'd speak up and not always get heard. But I think my greatest advice is, and it might sound a little silly, but don't worry about that stuff. Be yourself, be authentic, speak up, and trust in yourself, right? I mean, the more somebody just focuses on what's not around, or I'm the only one, the more I think you're not focusing on just trusting in yourself and your talents. So for me, it was never an issue of trying to focus on that, but just kind of, being part of the conversation, speaking up, calling it out if there's any issues, but really important that you just stay true to yourself and don't try to change for anybody else. Try to be yourself and, keep up. And if you're smart and talented, it'll come. Just trust in yourself.
Definitely. That's certainly good to hear from my perspective. Just keep pushing forward. Yeah. And then one other, very relevant question would be something that every space enthusiast has had a conversation about. There are so many people in this world who don't see space in the same amazing way that we do. They have other interests, shockingly. Mm-hmm. So if someone were to bring that up to you, given all of the blank happening on in the world today, and trust me, that blank can be anything in 2020 especially, how can we justify space? Like, how do you make other people understand space's value, and what is space's value that we should focus on it when there's so many other problems?
Yeah. So, obviously there's so many solutions that are used right now in space that I don't think everyone even recognizes. Obviously GPS. How much of our world is now dependent on GPS, from car navigation to lots of different solutions. So, and on top of that, space also provides critical communications and hurricanes and weather outages. We do a lot of safety services for flight. One of the companies that we're affiliated with that we started Iridium that tracks aircraft. And so I don't think people even recognize that, years ago when you'd fly between, the United States and South America or Africa or Europe, there's many hours that the planes were out of sight from any communications and tracking. And so having that technology from space now enables us to have safer flight paths. So there's a lot of ingrained space technologies that I don't think everyone recognizes that are critical for our own development and future of different businesses on the ground, whether that's shipping, aircraft, so I think that's a part of it. I think the other part that also kind of doesn't always get recognized is how much even from the outer space technologies that we've deployed and invested, a lot of those come, some of that lessons learned or knowledge gained actually then reverts back into technologies on the ground that were based on something that was learned via space. And so, I know that at the National Space Foundations, they've done a lot to recognize some of those companies that have used space knowledge and learning to then develop something on the ground that kind of is based upon that. So I think in those two areas is how I kind of explain to people and make them understand how much of their lives actually do have something space related into them that they don't really even know today.
Absolutely. We all hear about Velcro and Tang and a couple of the cute technologies, but I don't think people know how many technologies were born today, not in the Apollo era, but how many technologies we're dependent on that are being built every single day.
Absolutely. So I think in the medical field, the water purification, there's a lot that comes out of space gained technologies. And I think it's important that those keep getting recognized and explained so that it's not just about pure exploration for the sake of exploration. I mean, there's exploration for that sake, but there's also a lot that's gained from those explorations. That's really important for our day-to-day lives here on the Earth.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, to close up, we both know that commercial space is a rapidly evolving world. It's a whirlwind to keep on top of. If people want to try to stay on top of this phenomenon of commercial and new space, how would you suggest that they do so?
Wow, there's so many different avenues. It's exploding, which is exciting. The best for me is obviously there's things like, the social medias, Twitters, space foundations. There's a lot of different groups out there to kind of access, space news. I definitely go try to follow some of the analysts. I think is also a key that some people don't miss out on. There's some analysts that follow this industry really well, and they write some amazing reports about the future of the different sectors in our industry. So that's kind of the business side of it as well. But clearly there are so many avenues today. I don't know which ones to fully recommend, but just find people out there that you can follow, especially on Twitter. Find different sources that are in the industry and just try to learn as much as you can and access.
Yeah, I would second that. Space Twitter, and this is coming from me, who does not like Twitter at all. Space Twitter is a phenomenal entry point to the whole world.
It is. I'm pretty new to Twitter myself, but I'm finding it is once you can find people and then they lead you to other followers and you can see who's talking. You can it's a great way to kind of get instant access to a lot of different thoughts and connections in the industry and see what, some different reporters, what they're saying, different company heads, Iridium boss, Matt Desch, our CEO, he's a great one to follow. He's a lot of fun too. You can just see the different Twitter wars. I mean, there's a lot that happened in the past that just quite entertaining to see how the different companies can go after each other. And you can learn a lot if you just kind of follow the right people.
Absolutely. Speaking of that, how should people follow up on your work and Iridium's work if they're curious?
Yeah, well, definitely follow Iridium.com, which will go through all of our new technologies. I have Twitter, Suzi McBride, COO, but we'll retweet a lot of the businesses. What's unique for Iridium is we're actually wholesale, and then we've got different partners that build products. So it's really fun to watch our partners and what they're building. We do, tuna tracking and different kinds of ship technologies and airplanes. So it's fun to see all of the different ideas that they're doing. I'm actually doing a rally later this year with actually the head of HR from OneWeb. It's an all-female rally of 2 people that starts in Lake Tahoe and ends up in the sand dunes in San Diego. There's no technology, so we have to do it all by compasses and maps, which is really unique for somebody who's very technically ingrained, but it's all kind of based with Iridium tracking. So a lot of our partners are helping, and they do all the scoring system. There's a whole scoring system, and it's all done from space because of the remote locations. So if you want to follow our partners, that's like part of the Twitter. You follow one person, you can see when they retweet other people, you can see what our partners are doing and kind of the technologies that they're building upon.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Suzi. I appreciate you taking the time for a conversation today and for continuing to support the program.
Great. Well, it's been a pleasure, and I can't wait to see where the program, where all of you go as fellows and alumni as the years go on. I'm sure you'll be the future.
Absolutely.
Look forward to the new technologies you guys design and build.
Cheers to that. Well, have a great day, Suzi. If you are interested in becoming a fellow, applications open in September. Otherwise, to learn more about the MAT Fellowship, you can go to our website at MatthewIsakowitzFellowship.org, or you can find us on social media at MAT Fellowship. Thank you so much for joining us for navigating NewSpace. See you next time.